This week on Influence, let's rebuild social media from the ground up. It's going to take a lot of work, but the good news is we already know how to do it. Greetings, Netscape navigators and internet explorers. Welcome back to Influence with me, Matt Silverman. Thanks for hanging out for another week here in our listening community, talking about all things creativity on the internet, social media, and the things we like to build and make and watch and listen to. And I've got some news for you. It's a tiny thing. It's a small little footnote. We built the entire internet wrong. And we gotta patch it up. We gotta fix it. Let me rephrase that. We built the internet pretty great, but over the last 10 or 15 years, we have been using the internet in ways. We have been defaulting to internet use in ways that are they're not great for democracy. They're not great for mental health, and they're not great for the equity of information on the internet. We cover that too much on this show. And I am really, really thrilled to stop blabbing about it for 5 minutes and bring on an expert because a week or two ago, I subscribed to a variety of newsletters, that old thing, email, that interoperable platform where you can send and receive email from any service that you choose. And I saw quite a few headlines about this foundation called Free Our Feeds. I was like, oh, what's this? I click on it and it's like, hey, maybe billionaires should not control everything we see and do on the internet. I was like, yeah, we got to talk about that. So I reached out, and there's a lot of really cool people shepherding this project. I said, I got to talk to somebody here. And boy, did they deliver. My guest today is the executive director of the Social Web Foundation. I'm not as familiar with that, so I'm going to learn about that in a moment. And she was also the chief technology officer at the Center for Democracy and Technology, much more familiar with that organization, both of which I assume are nonprofits related to civil liberties, human rights, and equity in the digital age. But she is one of many advisors, custodians, I want to find out about that word as well, for Free Our Feeds, which is a movement to build more equitable social media platforms that are not controlled by single corporations or, billionaires. I have a lot to ask her. We have a lot to talk about. Please welcome Mallory Knodel to Influence. Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Did I get the resume correct? Oh, for audio listeners, we have a cat entering the frame, which is
he might be
excellent.
In and out. Sorry about that.
Well, no, don't apologize. What's your cat's name?
Archie.
Nice.
Yeah.
My son's name is Arthur, and we call him Archie every
cute.
now and then. So.
Wonderful. Yeah, he's on several videos of mine online, so folks will see a familiar fuzzy face.
Amazing. We'll ask Archie about Activity Pub and Federated Media momentarily. Welcome. I have so many questions. Thanks. Our listeners have questions. The thing I ask most guests who are usually content creators is how do you explain what you do for a living to the average person? And I think you will have an interesting answer to this because you work in a field that is not, I don't know, people probably don't have a typical understanding of it.
I work in a few fields that people don't have a typical understanding of, so it just compounds the issue, yeah? I call myself a public interest technologist. There are public interest lawyers out there. Some people understand that. That's a concept that's been around since the 70s. Public interest technologists are similar. I have a technical background. I apply that and I use that in nonprofit civil society advocacy spaces because, I started out thinking, the pinnacle of my contribution to humanity was going to be something like, well, maybe I could be the web admin for Amnesty International or something.
Yeah, okay.
Really was a dream of mine. And at some point, in the, mid to late 2000s, it was pretty apparent that the ways that we're using technology for movements, for social good, actually matter quite a bit. And so ever since, I've really shifted into more of an advocate myself. But I do it in two directions. So I'm a technical specialist, and I can advocate in policy spaces with a bit of technical underpinning. And then I also spend a lot of time in engineering spaces and global standards development as more of a human rights expert that understands the technology enough to intervene and be influential in those spaces as well. So that's,
right.
Kind of a complicated
It makes sense to me, and it leads me to two more quick questions, which are like, when you say technical background, was it programming and engineering? And did you go to school, or was it self-taught? Where did you come from?
These are such fair questions. I was always an activist first, and I happened to get my undergraduate degree in physics and math, just out of pure curiosity, honestly. I took one programming class and then did a bunch of sort of data-driven research projects in high particle physics, so high energy particle physics. So I ended up doing programming, but very incidental. It's just like it was the time, right? Today you can get a whole degree in public interest technology from a reputable university.
Yeah.
Then I just was in a lot of activist spaces at a time when people were like, hey, what's a website? Should we make one? I remember distinctly someone asking me what a podcast is. And I'm like, I don't really know, but let's sort that out. How is it not just radio streaming on the internet? Which essentially it is. So yeah, that's it. I was self-taught. And actually, though, I am a researcher and a student at NYU in computer science. So I'm kind of making up for last time and trying to get more of a formal background. It's never too late.
And then the policy advocacy stuff, like you said, there's probably an educational track for that these days. But was that formalized for you, or just your passion?
It was never formalized for me. I started out in movements. So I was working in social justice movements for many, many years, feminist movements, but most formatively and most remarkably in what was called at the time the sort of World Social Forum movement. This came out of like the World Trade Organization protests, Battle for Seattle, late 90s. I was somebody who participated in indie media as like a videographer and as a, proto-journalist.
Indie media, meaning like small websites that were not part of the larger publishers.
Yeah, so indie media is actually a whole movement. You can look it up. IMCs is what they were called back then. I think of actually those times as being pre-Web 2.0. Like maybe we'll get into this, but I think one of the critiques I have of the social platforms is they actually stole a lot of this democratized tech from movements that were really just trying to share information about protests online. Right. They were trying to democratize journalism and citizen journalism. And, my favorite use of it was figuring out where the critical mass bike ride was going to start, if it were in London or New York or whatever. Like those were brilliant uses of the tech. And now, the sort of idea that we can all be posting online all the time for everyone else to see it has become so commercialized. But it started out of this idea that sharing information online would be mutual aid, a catalyst for mutual aid and other kinds of social movements. So that's where I'm from. And that's kind of stuff that it's also, I guess, self-taught, but not like community taught, I guess. Working with those groups. Yeah.
You're in it, and you learn it, and you build it. You build the plane as you fly it. Man, the citizen co-opting the citizen journalism stuff is really interesting because, I came up in media, and my wife came up as a journalist and worked for like legit journalistic outlets like the AP and NBC and stuff, and she was at the forefront of that sort of stuff. Like she was the person who licensed the photo from the guy who took the Miracle on the Hudson. Like a guy, when the plane went down in the Hudson River, somebody put a photo on Twitter, and she was the person who reached out and said, "Can we put this on the Associated Press?" And that is such an antiquated, silly thing today. But at that time, it was like, this photo is owned by a Twitter user, and we must contact them and license. Anyway, and so so you made me think about like journalistic outlets were actively seeking it, and then also the tech platforms co-opted it as
That's right.
Simultaneously.
That's right. That's right. And the other irony obviously is that a lot of these journalistic outlets are not able to survive because of these platforms just squeezing every last value out of things without actually producing it themselves. And, this is the whole thing about the political economy now, but I think that's where we're headed. So, yeah.
Yep. We'll probably touch on that quite a bit here. But before we move on, what does your work look like today? Social Web Foundation, which I'm less familiar with, and Center for Democracy and Technology. What's your day-to-day like?
Yeah, so I left Center for Democracy and Technology in August to found a new organization. It's called the Social Web Foundation. So if you haven't heard of it, that's okay. We're small and we're still starting out.
New. Okay.
Yeah, but we're there to be real stewards for the social web, the open social web, right? As these platforms begin to interoperate more natively than just, the classic, like every social media platform is just screenshots of the other ones, right? Actually helping. This is
not interoperability.
Yeah, no, he's the one who always brings this up, and he quotes really the person who came up with that joke, and I don't remember the guy's name, so I can't take credit for that. But
you're stealing it from someone, and I'm going to be stealing it from you, so that's wonderful. Thank you.
It excellently describes the moment we're in. Like users, we're all everywhere all the time. And the tech is not working for us. It's working against us. There's a lot of friction. But it doesn't have to be this way. And so Social Web Foundation is working on the decentralized, is the sort of tech-ish term that we're using to describe platforms that do actually interoperate, where you can be in one corner of the social web and still talk to and appreciate and interact with content in other corners of it. And that's a technical underpinning. It's also for a lot of people a philosophy, a sort of politics, if you will. And I think it also will have a future as like an economic force as well. That's a prediction anyway. So that's what the social web is all about. Yep.
If you could get that, if you could lock that down by like next week, that would be great for me.
We would like to have all this in place yesterday, but there are people who've been working on it for a really long time, right? Whether or not it gets mass appeal, mass adoption to the point where you have these switching costs lowered to the point where you actually can find all your friends in these places. Okay. That is what remains to be seen, and that's what we're working on. So Social Web Foundation has a bunch of...
I haven't heard that term, but by that you mean like, what is the critical mass of contacts and content and friends that move over so that then it compels me to also move over and be with them on the federated platforms?
Yeah. I mean, when people left Twitter to go to Threads or to go to Bluesky or to go to Mastodon, they paid a price. I lost a few modest thousands of followers. I had people lost the content they were consuming because they couldn't any longer find the people they were following, not just the people who were following them. So there were costs, and there still continue to be costs. Like there's no one place where you can go where everybody is again. It's still an unknown. And I know that really for communities like your wife's or journalists, that's a real gap. Yep. It is a problem. And there are other communities like that feel it more than others. But, academics really relied on it a lot. As you can imagine, social movements, right? Like Black Lives Matter is a classic, social media campaign. It kind of is everywhere now. It's so ubiquitous. Like you find the Pope talking about it. Like it's not just on, Twitter or Facebook. But it really impacts folks that are trying to get the word out about certain issues and to organize with people. Not having this cohesive place where you can go is kind of our overall, I guess, switching costs. But it's mostly talked about in the sense of individuals feel that when they feel like they have to leave one platform for another.
Right. But and please educate me on this. Like, if everything goes back to being interoperable, because like the way I understand it, it's like it used to be this way. Websites, we made a decision that you could use Netscape Navigator and I can use Internet Explorer and we can view the same websites. You can use Hotmail, I can use Gmail. We can both read the same email. RSS and podcast are the same for now. It always was like this. The current model is not the norm, although all this stuff is so new. So my question is like, it's not so far-fetched that we could reinvent this. It's already there. It's just, we got to go back to it.
Exactly. It is exactly right. It does not have to be like this. That's a refrain I've already said twice now, because the technical underpinnings are there. And actually, podcasts are a really interesting case study. My former organization, CDT, did put out actually a report on podcasts, because and I worked on it before I left. Our thesis was, what is it? I think it might be that there are technical standards, and there's no one big player who's been able to eat all of podcasting, which is why it's still robust.
Not for lack
and
of
I
trying.
think that's essentially, they found some other really, really interesting things about podcasts as a specific case. But, email is still the same, but also I think it's like some staggering percentage that approaches almost, hundreds or whatever, that Gmail, even if you don't have a Gmail account, that your email passes through a Gmail server is a huge number. So they have eaten, they've Google and, Outlook as well. The other, if you don't have Gmail, you probably have Outlook.
Right.
They have a huge market share. These things are, to some degree, capitalism is just inevitable, right? Without regulation. And the US has had such big tech companies and has famously refused to regulate them for so long that this is kind of how we got here. But I think in the social web context, it was always the case that essentially we have to remember like what they're for, right? The social media companies that we can all think of as being the big ones we've used for a long time, they don't actually produce anything. What they do is they convince advertisers that people like to use this website.
They produce advertising inventory. That is all they do.
Exactly. And that's changed over time. Like in the beginning, it was like, well, lots of people like to use our website. You should advertise here. And then it was like, we can help you predict what people will click on because we are surveilling them so intensely. You should advertise here. And just like the promises keep piling up, the delivery does not improve. Like we know, I think Adam Curtis, I can remember this one to credit, has this take on social media advertising, which is like, it's like you're advertising for pizza, standing outside a pizza shop and handing your flyers to people who are walking out of the pizza shop with a pizza in their hand. It's like, it's not actually really that magical. And yet it has created absolutely enormous wealth for companies that essentially do nothing.
Right. Yep. Okay. I don't want to get too far afield on the advertising stuff. That's a very interesting analogy, and I would be interested to unpack it. But anyway, okay. So, all right, Social Web Foundation, its advocacy and its focus there. Well, before we move on, like when we say a foundation, it's a nonprofit, but like, is it grant money? Is it donations? Like, how do you operate these days?
So we have ahead of us a fair amount of interesting projects, right? We're trying to get like end-to-end encryption for direct messages in Fediverse platforms. We're working on various kinds of ways you could do like long-form text in short-form text. And you could basically put anything you want on the Fediverse in terms of objects, and it gets really, really interesting. So we're trying to focus on some specific projects like that. We work in 3 different ways, like with 3 main tactics, I guess I will say. The first is standards. So an important underpinning for anything that is interoperable and federated is that everyone is speaking the same language.
Right.
And while ActivityPub, the standard that we work on, has been around for a long time, it's still growing and it's still being extended. So we work in standards. And it also, I'll say, in my experience, standards bodies are great also for building not just consensus on the standard spec, but like you're building a community. It's a place where people can come, get involved in the conversation, govern the standard to some degree, etc. Social Web Foundation, then this kind of gets to your question about business model, right? We don't have, we're small, we're starting. We would love folks to donate to us. We would love the support. At the moment, our model has been focused on implementers. So any major platform that is implementing ActivityPub sees the Social Web Foundation as providing value to the broader ecosystem. And so they support us.
Okay.
And we kind of refer to them as supporters. Like we don't have a formal membership model or anything, but you can go on our website to see, who has given us funding. I will also say outside of that, we have received funding from the Ford Foundation. The Ford Foundation has a very robust commitment to social movements and human rights, and they're very technically savvy as well. They understand kind of why
that's nice to hear,
federated social media should exist. So they've also supported us. And then the last thing, the three-part, tactics of our organization is communities. So, it's kind of like the social media for what question, or, mission for what. I think we're doing this for people to enjoy themselves, to, have literal joy, to be creative, to talk to their friends and family. And my particular bent, as you might have guessed already, is I want to see social change. And I want the connectedness that the internet and the web provides to be part of that. So I'm really focused on certain kinds of communities that can access one another and can build movements together on those platforms.
Connectedness is good without the weaponization of like algorithmic for-profit media.
I agree. Yeah, I think we need to be building our own. And this is a really important point. Like we used to build our own.
Yes.
It got sort of overtaken by really, frictionless, fun, snappy interfaces. Then we were advertised to, and then our data was sort of taken. And by that time, like the stuff that we had built, like was kind of old and not fit for purpose anymore. So we're kind of trying to go back and redo it. And I will tell you, like working on the Social Web Foundation was not a huge direction that I was headed in like over a year ago, but it brought me such hope to see the proliferation of, different platforms using these open standards, that I just felt like I had to be part of this moment again.
Okay. All right. You're giving me hope. Governance, again, layperson here, but like we have W3C, we have RSS, we have ICANN, we have, what's the other one you just made me think of? Like standards that Unicode. It's like, there are governing bodies that say all the tech has to do this and that so we can all talk to each other. So again, you're not inventing the wheel here, right?
That's right. Yeah. And we're not trying to be the only ones. Like we're
Archie's
not trying to beat out our competition.
Listeners. Yes.
Yeah, he was going to park it right here. So I had to intervene.
I would love if for the rest of the interview, it's just a cat butt while you talk behind him. That would be excellent. Great for views. So is it, will it be connected to those governing bodies in any way, meaningful way?
Yeah, so the ActivityPub is a standard of the World Wide Web Consortium. That's the W3C, and has been for several years now. There's an active community group that talks about these issues. There are some task forces that I think are moving things forward, like the end-to-end encrypted DMs and so on. And then, potentially there will be actual extensions, will be specification standards documents going forward. There are elements, so not all of what we're talking about today is going to be specifically the ActivityPub protocol, because there are others out there.
Right.
I think the truth of the matter is that there are a lot of elements of any kind of software platform that are standardized. Like one really obvious one, to me, it's not going to be obvious to everyone, so I apologize for almost characterizing it as obvious, is that, sign-on and authentication is something that is super duper hard. The costs for getting it wrong, like, if somebody hacks your system or whatever, are so high. Yeah. So there's been a really long legacy of trying to get authentication to be a standard, no matter what it is, right? It doesn't matter if it's your bank or a social media application or, your university, like those constituent authentication pieces are almost all the same everywhere. So you could apply those blocks to anything that comes forward. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's federated, right? That doesn't mean it's like you as the user have control over that.
Yeah.
That's another step. And I think that is very much application layer. If I can, OSI layer for a second, it's at the very tippy top of the layer cake because it's the closest to the users.
Yeah.
Now, I think a lot of like another place I'm involved in is the Internet Engineering Task Force. That's some layers down. That's sort of networking layer. That's, transport layer. That's where a lot of the internet is all running the same stuff, right? And if you're running it, it's one protocol. It's the Internet Protocol even, it's called.
Yes.
And if you are using that, you are effectively on the internet. So it's all using that, but that's not the same as, can I as a person subscribe to this service? And if I don't like it or have other reasons to want to change, pick up everything about me that the service has gathered, take it to another comparable service, and also all the other people and content and things that I've, interacted with. That's a tall order. That actually takes a ton of time, and standards are certainly part of it because you need to also be speaking the same language. There need to be similar code points. There needs to be a lot of open source, hopefully software written to support that.
So you're saying it's not looking good for next week?
Yeah, this is going to be a journey, not a destination. I'm just going to say it, but that's good, right? Because the journey of sort of VC capitalism is pretty straight line, and not a lot of us get to participate in those decision making processes.
You're covering it here, but for the lay person, is including me, like federated media, like I understand it as like web pages and email, but like what else is going on, technically speaking? How can I port my followers and content to another service and still communicate with those people if they do not move with me? Is that my understanding?
That's a solid question. Yeah.
Okay.
I think there's one element, which is like the data that we produce and how that's stored. So people might be familiar actually with either Instagram or Twitter. You can actually download your data, right? I haven't met anybody, including myself, with somewhat technical savvy doing anything with that. Like you have it now, and that's cool. And you can yourself troll through it if you ever want to, but you can't now take that blob and upload it somewhere else and have all of that information published again. So data is one. So in order to have that portability, and there's also like a data transport initiative. That's another small organization. I'll just give a shout out to them who've been working on this issue for a really long time. You need to have similar or comparably similar data structures so that, you download it from service X, you can then upload it to service Y, and it all kind of fits into place.
So those are standards. That's a standardization.
That would be a standardization. In ActivityPub, it's like a sort of proto standard. It's called activity streams, and that's just a data structure standalone. And other protocols besides ActivityPub actually use data streams just for the data structure.
Okay. Sorry, this is a bit of a pie in the sky philosophical question, but like this is making me think like, okay, let's say I want to leave YouTube and go to Bluesky. Well, my 4-hour-long video essays will not go there. It doesn't make sense. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like, there might be social media structures that we haven't even imagined yet, which would make no sense to be data portable to other platforms. And I don't know, maybe that doesn't have an answer yet, but...
Yeah, that's a solid point. One of the things that Bluesky is doing right now with its structure is you could host your own data.
Yeah.
So this would be, it's not on Bluesky servers. It's not on YouTube servers. What you would be doing this whole time, from the moment you subscribe or whatever, is you would be hosting those videos on your own server. And, Bluesky would essentially be giving everyone else on Bluesky the sort of interface to your content, but the content would always be yours. And so the other thing that's implicit in the sort of data portability piece is like you have these permanent pointers. So like if you want your followers to port over, you need to be able to point back to who those followers are and what server they're using, right? So it could be that the content is hosted by you or by, I don't know, somewhere else, and that it's just pointed to from the new service. So you're right, though, about this whole, there's a lot that we haven't even imagined yet. And I think that's really fun.
Yeah. It's exciting and terrifying. It's also making me realize that like home server, do-it-yourself server technology needs to be like iPhone level easy.
Oof.
For normal people, because like you're like you could host your own data. I'm like, no thanks.
Personally, I cannot do that. Yes, exactly.
I'm having just getting the videos that I make weekly up to the cloud and not deleting them is a fucking pain in the ass. So
totally,
just a little brick that's always on that hosts everything that just goes beep boop and it's done. Like that could be. We need like a hardware solution for that.
Well, you know what's great about interoperability, and I'll just like take us aside for a second, is a lot of people think of interoperability as like, well, I have these two services that are similar and now they talk to each other and that's very cool. The other thing we kind of overlook is that once you have interoperability between similar services, you then have this opportunity to have intermediary services that do different stuff that sits across the different implementations. So one example is an organization called IFTAS. This is IFTAS. I will not expand that acronym because I can't. They are working on content moderation tools that are platform agnostic. So the idea that they could solve some really, really hard problems with very specific expertise in like the child protection space, for example. They're not trying to worry about the tech so much. What they want to build is something that's durable enough and interoperable enough that it will work across any service. So I could spin up my own, pie in the sky dream platform that I just crafted out of ActivityPub and some shoestring and bubblegum. And then without needing to have that capacity in like child protection, I could just use IFTAS's tool to make that work. And so I think what you're describing with like, we need things to be easier for these like intermediary services, like hosting your own data. Absolutely. And I hope that we'll see a bunch of really cool tools like that crop up because you'll have the ability to serve users not just from one social media platform, but from all of them.
Yes. I think the open source community is up for the challenge. It makes me think of WordPress of like, I don't know how websites work. Well, just download this, plug it in, host it or buy hosting or self-host it. And then, I need a widget to do my credit cards and I need a thing to do a blog. It's like, you're just plugging in things from different, like, again, we already did this. We just need to do it for social media. And then you've got open source people who are going to be like, let's go. And then you're going to have like thousands of small businesses being like, we'll make a widget for your social thing and it's $7 a month rather than Facebook, give me all your data. We're the richest company.
Or the poor businesses who make the widget, but they make it 17 times for every single one of the social platforms. Like they'll be able to just sync their engineering into one thing that works across all of them. And I love that you bring up WordPress because they are another one of our supporters. In fact, you can use on a WordPress site ActivityPub as a widget, I guess we're calling them, a technical term. And you can
I don't know if that's
automatically
accurate. I haven't used
Fediverse.
WordPress in a while.
I think it's like add-on?
Plugins?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they are also on board, right? And that's amazing because you get so many people with WordPress sites that could, with very little effort now, be putting all of their blog content on social media, like just literally automatically.
You really are painting a picture of a world that is so easy and effortless to use. Like it's not it will never be perfect, but it will be plug and play, and it will be and it will make the case of like, hey, if I only use Instagram, I can only reach my Instagram people, but if I use Coologram over here, I can do everything, and that could move the needle. That could bring people over.
That's right.
Okay.
And there is actually an interoperable federated version of Instagram. It's called Pixel Fed. So
Yes,
for
I
folks
just
who
saw
want
that.
to
Yep.
check that out, you should totally check that out.
Yeah, I should. Okay. All right. You're giving me hope. You know what? I think we're going to take a break.
Okay.
But before we do, I must quiz you on our show's court-mandated trivia segment. It's a multiple choice question. Are you prepared?
I am. I'm not, but I'm excited.
Okay. All right, here's the deal. If you get this question right, I will contribute February's Patreon revenue to free our feeds as a donation.
Awesome. Thank you. That's very awesome.
If you get this question wrong, I will contribute Patreon's the February Patreon to Social Web Foundation.
Okay. This is really messed up incentive structure here, but I don't know.
Game. This is going to prove your bias if you throw the game.
But I'm such an A+ gold star student that I just really want to be right. So that's the incentive, no matter what.
That's how we roll in this house too. Board games are challenging, mostly for the adults in this family. So today we're talking about technology, and you know who will not be joining Bluesky anytime soon? Can you guess?
Is this the quiz?
No, this is just the wind up to the pitch.
Okay, because I feel like there are dozens of people, but yeah, tell me.
The Amish.
Okay, yeah, fair point.
If you could get the Amish on the Fediverse, then we're really cooking.
Yeah, well, they have a lot of markets, right? Like, I need to know where to buy their food because it's so amazing. They've got to be advertising somewhere. Just say it.
We recently went and we're just driving through Pennsylvania, and you see the buggies and, the chocolate, farm factories and the farms and everything. Anyway, contrary to popular belief, the Amish of Pennsylvania do allow certain types of technology in their communities, but it is a case-by-case basis, and it must be agreed upon by communities and religious bodies, okay? I'm going to give you a list of technologies that have been approved by some percentage of Amish communities. You are looking for the one that has been accepted the most. One of the technologies on this list has been adopted by 97% of all Amish families in Amish country, Amish areas of Pennsylvania. Here are your choices. Is it A, refrigerators? And by that I mean mechanical refrigerators, not like ice boxes that are not mechanical. B, running water in your bathtub.
Okay.
C, semi-related, indoor flushable toilets.
Right.
Or is it D, motorized washing machines? Or is it E, chainsaws? Now again, all of these are used by some percentage of the Amish. Could be a low percent, could be high. You're looking for the one that pretty much all of them are down with that.
Okay. Yeah, this is a really fascinating question. I feel like chainsaws are so efficient, but also, there are tools for this, and it's also exercise,
Right.
that aren't gas-powered motors. Indoor flushing. I lived in a squat at some point, right? During this whole movement stuff, even when I was doing intermedia stuff, and I can tell you, it is not difficult to flush a toilet if you have running water.
Yeah.
But you sort of need the running water. And since those two things appear in the list together, I'm going to have to go with the running water in the house. I was compelled by the refrigeration because I tell you, obviously there's a lot of the economics of running an Amish community require a lot of baking and serving food and so on. So I can imagine they use it. But I think transversely across all of the communities, I'm going to have to go with the running water.
Okay, so you're specifically saying choice B, which is running water in the bathtub, not the flushable toilet.
I'm into that. Yes.
All right, Mallory chooses B. We will find out the correct answer right after this break. It's time to thank all those beautiful people who make this show possible, and this month of February, your contributions will be going to make the internet more beautiful, perhaps rebuilding the framework of social media to make it more fair, more just, more equitable. We can do it. Mallory's telling us how. And thank you for supporting me and supporting this work. And thank you for supporting your local open source software shop. That's how it works, right? You just go to the little store in your neighborhood and you get some open source stuff. That's where I get mine. Thank you to the executive producers at the $10 or more level. They are Bowie Barks, Duran, William, and of course Dominic Kerr. Thank you very much for the support. And it's time to see if Mallory knows her Amish technologies. Will she get the trivia question right? Let's find out. We're back with Mallory Knodel from Free Our Feeds and the Social Web Foundation. And we're talking Amish. We're talking about the Amish. What technologies are approved in Amish communities? All of these are approved by some percentage of Amish communities and religious organizations, but Mallory's looking for the one that is the most accepted. 97% of Amish communities have one of these in their homes. Was it A, refrigerators, mechanical refrigerators? B, running water in the bathtub? Mallory chose running water. C, indoor flushable toilets. D, motorized washing machines. E, chainsaws. I always give guests an opportunity to change their answer after the break. Have you reconsidered? Have you thought about it further?
I think it's probably B, but I'm excited to hear the answer.
All right, she's locked it in. I am fascinated to tell you, and I regret to inform you, that it is D, motorized washing machines. For some reason, washing clothes is like, yeah, we don't have time for that. We got to get a washing machine up in here. 97% of Amish families have a washing machine somewhere on the farm or in the house or something.
That's very surprising. That would be like the bottom of my list.
Right? But yeah, I thought so too.
Clothes are a hazard. Yeah.
I suppose. We do have some listener questions. All right, this comes from Evan. He actually has a variety of questions here, so we can go through and talk about them as they hit. Well, we've covered. Well, okay. I feel like Mastodon popped off and was like a little bright spot, and then was quickly eclipsed by Bluesky in terms of like media attention. So Evan asked, what is Free Our Feeds hoping to build into Bluesky that doesn't already exist on Mastodon? And so that's an interesting question. But then I guess my addendum to that question from me is like, do people care about do people outside of the hardcore FOSS people care about Mastodon anymore? Does that make sense?
It does. I think your question and Evan's question are really valid. I'm going to come at this in a way that might feel very sideways, but the Free Our Feeds campaign is a moment. It's a moment that is trying to do what you alluded to before, which is capture the users who've all flooded to Bluesky.
Okay. Because
I think it's really important that folks recognize this. Bluesky is not in any fundamental way, the technology or the governance of the company, different than something like Twitter. I mean, it was literally a copy of Twitter.
Yeah.
And Jack Dorsey founded it.
Right.
Who, worked for Twitter. So The point is, we want at Free Our Feeds to uncover that for folks, to help them understand that unless there are very real material changes that happen, either at Bluesky or in a sort of alternate Bluesky, which is kind of what the Free Our Feeds is proposing, the same thing will happen again and again and again. Right. You will be stuck one day with shareholders or leadership in a venture-funded capitalist company who've made decisions that you don't like, and you will have no recourse at all. So I think why this is answering your and Evan's questions about Mastodon is that those things exist, and they've inspired Jack Dorsey, who started Bluesky. They've inspired the folks that are part of Free Our Feeds because it is the right way to build alternative technology. And so we're trying to create this moment where Bluesky folks understand what's at stake, and they also could potentially migrate to an alternative Bluesky if they needed to, because we took the time and effort and money to build it. And nobody's done that yet. No one has built something that actually interoperates with Bluesky, even though they say it's almost like an open washing at this point, right? They say that it's open. They say that they want other people to build on it and use it and so on. But materially speaking, that's not possible. So we want to make it possible.
Okay. Yeah, it's really fascinating. Adjacent question. Does a platform or a technology need to be nonprofit for this all to work? Like, I just feel like the danger of capitalism is always lurking. And look, we cover Wikipedia a lot here, and I'm just like, it's a miracle. And it's a miracle because it was a choice that there will never be an advertisement anywhere on the thing, and you can download it and it's open and you can do whatever you want. And that's the miracle of Wikipedia. We have to build other stuff that way. And I don't know, it's donations, it's grants. Like, what do you think about the financing of this stuff somehow?
I think with any federation, an open source project like this that has true interoperability, you have to live with both. I think the problem we have with status quo is that it's our only option. Our only option right now is corporate funded space. Right. And that effectively means like our public square is on private property. And there are some very negative effects with that. The other option, though, is if you have no business model, you have no awareness of the cost of these things. I mean, it actually costs money to run this stuff. I know we're all just like sharing cat pictures and everything, but like if you knew how much people were spending on your right to send your friends cat pictures,
server farms and whatever.
We have to figure out how to do that. So I think the answer is like, we need monetization. We need to think about sustainability. It doesn't have to be gross, like behavioral targeted, like data farming marketing, but it could be like, hey, subscription models could work. Newspapers have existed for a long time.
That's crazy, Mallory. How dare you say I should pay for a service that gives me lots of value and keeps me connected with people?
Imagine. And like we were talking about before, I think it actually opens up whole new potential revenue models that we haven't even thought of before. I think social media got somewhere with like content creators and so on. And I love that a lot of the subscribers of your show do content creation, because I will admit, I think one of the reasons why, Mastodon and some of the other social media, open social media that have been around for a long time aren't that popular is there's not enough of that really cool, creative, fun content. So it's a plea to like bring
because
in
there's less virality. So
right.
The reason people go on TikTok is because they can get famous very quickly and then reach large audiences. And the alternative is like, let me start from zero on a place where no one follows me, where there's no algorithms. That's a better long-term plan for a content creator, but it sure is slow and doesn't pay the bills anytime soon.
I'm hoping we find something in the middle. And I think that's what's about to happen. I think there's no putting this back in the bottle, this idea that you can make these things interoperable. You can leverage multiple communities. They can be doing different things. They can have different business models. But at the end of the day, like we have a more is more situation. And I would love to see, imagine what would have happened in the TikTok US ban, right? If you could have just moved your stuff from one place to another, we would have been really set up to weather that storm and to be like, actually, we don't want this company involved in our economy. I think given the certain circumstances, it's a terrible idea. And we could go into the privacy implications of that, but that's a different podcast episode.
I will have you back. If you're willing to come back, I would love to talk about all that stuff. So that's great. Evan's second question, which is, we mentioned it a little earlier. WordPress is open source, and yet it hasn't stopped it from all this drama in the last few weeks, which he's alluding to. I guess WordPress, the company, didn't like how certain extensions were operating, so they shut them off or deprecated them, which then caused 40% of the internet to not function the way it should have. So Evan's asking, what's the takeaway here? Do we need new governance structures for software? And what should those look like? I recently read a stat that 40% of websites are hosted on WordPress. And so while it is open source and you can self-host, it is all contingent on one type of thing. And that also seems a little precarious, right?
Oh, yeah. And I think there are some caveats to that, right? Like I could host my own WordPress and I could fork it. We don't have to get into those details. I think the question is right. I think the danger is there. And I do agree that we need new governance structures. that don't yet exist. So we have these sort of standards bodies that are really there, right, to just like, what's the best way to configure this particular technology? And then basically everybody just gets out of the way, right? There's no protocol police following up to make sure that you implemented it to spec. You know, these are documents that in some cases are narrative, like there's no code at all. There are no code points. It's just like describing the way some technology is supposed to work. We have to go a little bit deeper than that. We absolutely need to think of governance mechanisms. This is essentially the thrust of a lot of my career, which is to figure out what those governance mechanisms are so you can bring human rights and civil society organizations to those tables so they can explain to you what the hell is happening in Myanmar.
Right.
What in the actual is going on in Brazil right now. And
structure your governance this way because, oh shit, it's going really bad here or there. And you didn't think of that. Okay.
Right. Like, did you know your technology is being used to stalk women? Did you know, and without these sort of places or fora to have these discussions, you not only get weird stuff like what happened with WordPress, you don't have this important feedback loop with most affected communities that can help improve your product. Okay. And I'm going to tell you, like, because it didn't come up yet, and I always try to work this in, having worked for human rights organizations for the last almost 2 decades, where folks have been really worried about content moderation issues, where they've been really worried about these harms, we have spent all our time making Facebook better. Like, we've invested so much government money, so much philanthropic funding into these capitalist projects to improve the way they work for people most affected by the harms. And instead of building our own, right? Like, I just think about all those tens of millions of dollars that I personally have been touched by over the years, and we spend it all working on capitalist walled gardens. And I'm disappointed that we weren't able to spend that same amount of money making Mastodon more fun, making WordPress more governable, et cetera, right?
Okay. And just to clarify, meaning it's not about Facebook doesn't need your money. It's not giving Facebook money to implement, say, trust and safety. It's about spending money to repair damage that Facebook and other
cleaning up their messes,
cleaning up their messes rather than building your own.
Yeah, it's been a reckoning. I will tell you, like, in my career, it's been a real reckoning. I think not just now, but I remember there was a moment I worked before CDT. I was actually at a free expression organization based in the UK called Article 19, which is named for its devotion to free speech, free expression in the UN Declaration on Human Rights. And it was tough for our team to realize how much of the organization was spending on working with YouTube, working with Facebook on these really difficult social issues that not only did the company, it wasn't just that they didn't want to hear from us because we were giving them all these problems they needed to fix. They didn't have their own expertise. They hadn't bothered bringing in experts to deal with these problems. We had to raise them for them. And I just feel like we shouldn't be in a situation where we're having to clean up these messes.
Right.
It's not really what we're for.
Well said. Okay. Well, I have a voicemail for you. I'm going to play that right now. We've got calls from the public. It's a voicemail from Bobby.
Hi, Matt. This is Bobby from New York, and I have a question for Mallory. I'm an educator, so my question is, what should high school students be learning about AI? And how do we make sure all students have access to AI tools? Thanks.
I know we haven't touched on AI too much. It obviously is a factor in what you are built, or factor, threat, part of the puzzle here. Are you doing any of that work? I'm not sure you're obviously thinking about it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because we know that AI has been powered by a lot of data, and those sources of data have to be varied. They have to be massive. A really great source of it is all of us who've been posting and talking on social media for a really long time. So there's absolutely a relationship here. And I think it's a really good point that we haven't touched on so much, but that, all of the stuff that we do online is ostensibly making AI better. Right. But we don't get to monetize, or we don't get the benefits of that growth, that these are products that the companies owned. Right. We talked a little bit earlier about like Facebook's advertising has been marketed as AI driven. And so it's much smarter and it's better than other competitors that also sell ad space. What do high school students need to know? I mean, I take this in a couple of ways, right? Like one is just literacy. Like, can we uncover a little bit more how these things work so that more of us get the flow of, data into model, back out, and we understand its limitations. We understand how our privacy might be impacted and so on. So I'm all there for that. And then I think there's another way to take the question, which is like I think the reason we're talking about AI all the time now is that it's been democratized. I mean, at the beginning of in the 2000s, we were witnessing a democratization of the web and social activity online. Now we're witnessing this massive democratization of AI tools. And there's a part of us, and there's a part of this discourse that's afraid of that. But I think that's always been true. Like anything that gets democratized so quickly, and anybody can use it for any reason at all, like we start to panic and we're like, well, what about, I could be a responsible user of this and it helps me in my work. But what about the children, or what about, people in countries we're a little afraid of? This is not an uncommon pattern for how democracy or how technology gets democratized. So my tendency is to try to fight that a little bit and think about, well, I mean, I am also a student right now. And I can tell you that a world in which we assume AI means that I no longer have to write a 10-page paper on something. I can just turn in bullet points that are as succinct as possible, that just get the bare bones idea across, that an AI couldn't generate for me, because all the AI is trying to do is turn those few bullet points into 10 pages, right? So I don't know. I think it changes the nature of education. I think we should be absolutely teaching students both of these things, how to understand it and how to use it responsibly. Right. But that's also true with I was going to say,
we haven't even taught kids how to use the web and social media responsibly. So now we have this new world-changing thing that we're way behind on. Education's way behind. And just to put a fine point on what you said about fear, I'm not afraid of people using AI. I'm afraid of the companies who are using it and how they're building it. I'm, worried about the same things you are, of like, we need to learn lessons from corporate social media so that we do not repeat them with corporate AI models.
Yeah. And I think the other risk that we've seen for a long time, not just in the last few years because of ChatGPT, is that, AI is used as like a hand wave. Like, Mark Zuckerberg was on Capitol Hill trying to convince everybody that like there were no problems in Facebook. We're using AI. Don't worry, we have it covered. And that's tied into the well, if people aren't literate and they don't understand what that even means, then it's so easy to overpromise and to sort of hand wave around real actual issues. So we need to embrace it, and we can't have both. We can't control it and resist the democratization of it, and at the same time expect this literacy to just happen. I think we have to really lean in, and I mean that genuinely.
Yeah, it's beautifully said. All right, to wrap up here, what's next for Free Our Feeds? Like, I think, like you said, it's a moment, and from what I gather from the website, it's like, hey, we're trying to raise money to start building this. So I may have alluded to this earlier, but like, it's individual donations, but it's grants. Like, what are the immediate next steps for the project?
We're going to keep raising money, and the custodians are there to make sure that whatever we do receive then gets parceled out, hopefully just kind of one lump sum, but we might do sub-grants and so on, to folks that are actually going to build stuff. Yeah. We're trying to fund things that are difficult to fund. So, and this is probably too in the weeds for a lot of readers, but like, you can imagine that building something new with new code and all of that is like actually relatively easy to fund if you have a good idea. Paying a bill for web hosting is like not exciting. Like people do not want to pay for your upstream internet connection, right? So we're trying to fund the stuff that's a bit harder to fund because either it's like very infrastructure layer or it's like hard to describe to funders for why it's valuable. So the custodians will work for the better part of 2025 to figure out how to spend that resourcefully. And I hope it's clear from the website and from the campaign materials that have made it out there that we're all very open and accessible to feedback. And we want to hear from folks. And that's, I think, what we're going to be doing. So just pushing the campaign more to raise more money and then to figure out where that money goes. That's it. This is the moment in time to do it. I would love to see some of that go to bridging these worlds between the existing open social protocols and what Bluesky could promise to all of its many and continually increasing user base. So yeah, we'll see.
Great. And then if people want to connect with you or follow your work, I would say, hey, where should people follow you on social media? But where do you hang out on the internet these days?
So I'm on Mastodon. My URL is at a small server called techpolicy.social, and I'm at Mallory. I'm also on GitHub at Mallory, which is a lot easier to remember for folks who want to follow my work there. And then I'm on LinkedIn, and my name is pretty unique, so you can just do a little search. Thanks.
We'll link to all those places in the show notes and the video description. Mallory Knodel, thank you so much for this extraordinary conversation. I went in thinking, let's learn about this. Who knows if it's going to work? And then now I feel like I can see it. I can see what the future could be. And it's very hopeful and exciting.
Me too. I'm excited for that.
We can do it. You can do it. I can do it. Every person that stops using the other thing and goes to the new thing that is better means one more friend, family member, contact that is there for your network to follow you to. So perhaps that is a way to protest is not exactly the right word, but to move forward. And I love what Mallory said about switching cost, I think was her term. It sucks, man. It sucks to have worked so hard on whatever it is you do. Maybe that's just funny tweets. Maybe that's content creation. Maybe that's building a brand or an identity with, or a real community. That takes years of fucking work. And then for these platforms to just become so shitty and abusive where you have to throw that away it's a slap in the face. I felt it. I'm sad about it. But I'm really encouraged by the work that Mallory and her crew are doing because it like we said in the interview, it's a real bummer to jump from like a community you built for many years to nothing of like, hey, I'm on Bluesky, no one's here, I'm a loser here, no one's with me, and now I can, like I said, I can actually see the future where this could really work. Where in 5 years, when we leave whatever the next platform is, we don't have to start over. That's quite powerful. And I hope you'll consider it and take a look at what else is out there. And tell a friend. As always, I really have to stress that you should be kind. Rewind your podcasts after listening, and I will talk with you in 1 week's time.